Welcome to Recap Our Studio.
The story of the 2014 biographical war film American Sniper is being recreated in this audio. The film's prologue takes place on an Iraqi battlefield. An adult female and a toddler are seen emerging from a building by Chris Kyle. Both of them give off weird vibes, and the lady gives the child what seems to be a grenade. Through the radio, Chris reports the situation and receives orders to remove the danger. In spite of his reluctance, he fires the shot. When he was younger, he often accompanied his father on hunting trips. His father tells him he has a talent and will grow up to be a wonderful hunter once he makes his first kill. Chris is now a seasoned ranch hand and rodeo cowboy after working his way through the ranks over the years. When he gets back to the apartment, he discovers that his girlfriend has been sleeping with another guy. The guy is dragged outside and thrown out, and he follows suit by kicking her out of the home. Usual of cheaters, she insults Chris before she goes. The TV coverage of the 1998 U.S. Embassy bombings he watches that night solidifies his resolve to enroll in the Navy the next morning. Starting off as a regular recruit, he eventually undergoes extensive special training to become a sniper with the United States Navy SEALs. Chris and the other recruits are out having a good time at a pub when he happens to encounter Taya. They spend time together drinking and talking and seem to get along rather well. After some time has passed, Chris phones Taya to set up a date, and the two wind up spending the night together. Chris then tells Taya he loves her and proposes to her as an announcer is giving live updates on the 911 attacks. Chris and his crew got the news that they're being sent to Iraq on the day of the wedding. Here we are taken back to the very first scene in the film, as the mother and kid are introduced. Chris kills them both, but the female survivor tosses the grenade onto the oncoming American forces. The explosion fortunately had no negative consequences. Given that this is his first murder, and that it was of a child, he is obviously disturbed by the event. Later in the trip, he obtains the reputation of a legend thanks to his skillful elimination of many foes. Taya, Chris's wife, calls to let him know that he has another sibling serving in Iraq. Next, the commanding officer gives a briefing on Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, a Jordanian fighter who was sponsored and trained by bin Laden and whose capture was the top objective. Due to the fact that the Marines were freshly recruited civilians, Chris hints after the briefing that he may be on the ground with them guiding them on the door-to-door search. Mark advises him to stay on the roof and scope out the area, killing any enemies he finds, while the Marines perform the breach and search. Chris goes inside with one of the Marines to help with the door-to-door search. An whole family, including a little boy and his dad, is located within the structure. Chris, with the aid of a translator, learns about Zarqawi and his second-in-command, the butcher whose true name was a miracle of fame, after determining that they pose no danger. The sheik proposes leaving the SEALs with the butcher in exchange for $100,000. After confirming the butcher's identification with DEA agent Sneed back at the base, they return to the combat zone in search of the sheik. But Mustafa, the sniper for the Iraqi insurgents, can be seen waiting for Chris to return so he can tell her the good news that they are having a son. Mustafa attacks them as they are talking, and shots are fired. Taya can hear the chaos and gunshots around her via the phone. Chris ducks for cover and uses a mirror to see the butcher stealing the sheik's child. He ascends the building staircase and reaches the roof. When the sheik tries to intervene, the butcher pulls out a drill and threatens to put it in the boy's head. The youngster cries out in pain while the sheik begs frantically for him to be taken away. Chris attempts to get in a fight, but Mustafa fires at him, striking his helmet. The kid's skull is drilled by the butcher, and the sheik tries to stop them by running toward them, only to be shot dead. Chris attempts, but Mustafa holds him down, thus the mission fails. Chris will be back in the US in 3 weeks. After a long separation, the pair is happy to spend time together. Just days after Taya gives birth at home to a son, Chris goes for a second tour of duty, and his wife begs him not to forget to come back safely. They were reunited in a warm hug when he arrived at the Iraqi base and he saw his younger brother. His younger brother appears a little rattled by the conflict, and the two brothers converse for a while. In addition to Chris's promotion to Chief Petty Officer, the colonel also informs him that he is now the country's most sought man and that he has a reward of $180,000 on his head. They broke into the building across the street from where Butcher was said to be hiding on the night of their stakeout. The family living there was questioned whether they knew the Butcher, and they said no. They arrive later, pitch up camp, and start keeping tabs on the Butcher. The guy invited the troops to join him for dinner, and they gladly accepted. During the lunch, Chris notes the guy has a bruise on his elbow, and she assumes he is a sniper since he may have been lying down with his elbow against the ground, as a sniper would. Chris takes a break and investigates the area for anything out of the ordinary. As he looks about, he hears a creaking sound from the floor and decides to remove the rugs to reveal the hidden firearms and other weapons. Instantly, he enters, seizes the guy by the collar, and returns him to the chamber. The other guys follow him and marvel at the arsenal. Later, Chris orders the guy to assist the group in sneaking inside the building where the butcher is hiding. Their position is invaded by the army. He knocks on the door, but neither of the insurgents answers, so he shoots them both dead. Then, the troops launch an assault inside the structure. Chris runs ahead and sees the butcher making his escape as they discover a victim being tied up. The soldier and the insurgent engage in a brief but intense exchange of gunfire. The butcher exits the area in a car, but Chris follows him and shoots it out of the sky, killing the butcher inside. Chris and his men return to their fortifications. Once again residing in the United States. His kid and he are at a garage when they run across a fellow soldier, Mads. Mads expresses his appreciation to Chris by recalling the day in Fallujah when the two were trapped in a home and needed to be rescued by Chris and the Marines. Chris also rescued him by carrying him to safety. Chris has been invited to the Veterans Affairs by Mads. Chris may be exhibiting PTSD symptoms when he sneaks a look at his newborn daughter and becomes violent when he hears her scream in the hospital nursery. The third time he deploys to Iraq, one of his soldiers, Ryan Biggles, is shot by Mustafa and is taken back to the base in a critical condition after being evacuated. The squad has decided to go back out into the field to finish the task. Mark is shot in the head and is assumed dead after the ambush that occurs during the operation. Mark's mother attends the military burial back home and reads a letter he sent to her 2 weeks before he passed away. Chris pays a hospital visit to Biggles and finds that he is doing okay. Chris informs Biggles that he will be returning to Iraq to carry out the assignment. Taya confides in Chris later that night about how she believes he has been emotionally absent from their children's life, despite the fact that he has always been there. Taylor replies that she may not be here when Chris returns from Iraq to finish the task, to which Chris agrees. Chris learns to his horror that Biggles passed away during the operation to fix his wounds back in Iraq. Mustafa's shooting of U.S. Army combat engineers constructing a barrier is creating trouble for the military, thus Chris and his team have been tasked with eliminating him. As the battalion moves forward, Chris and his sniper team find themselves stationed on an enemy rooftop. Chris learns Mustafa's whereabouts when he shoots down one of the soldiers working on the barrier. He then sits up in the direction Mustafa was last seen and discovers that he is 2,100 yards away. He takes a gamble, aiming from almost 2,100 yards out, and his shot hits Mustafa, killing him. In doing so, however, he has revealed the location of his squad to a large number of armed militants, who have soon encircled them and begun firing. The unit makes a valiant effort to maintain the position, but when they run low on ammunition and are overwhelmed by the rebels, they radio in for a QRF ordnance drop, signifying that they are willing to give their lives for the cause. In the middle of the chaos and violence, Chris makes a heartfelt phone call to Taya to let her know he is ready to return home. Even though the QRF got there on time, they weren't able to hit their mark because sandstorm was rolling in and clouding everything up. While still under fire, the group makes a hasty exit from the structure as the sandstorm provides some cover. Chris is shot while trying to escape and almost gets left behind. But one of his crew members sees what's happening and stops the getaway truck to seize Chris. He has a drink at a bar upon his return to the United States and then phones his wife. Now on alert all the time and plagued by flashbacks of the war, Chris finds it difficult to settle back into regular life. During a family cookout, he nearly beats his dog before coming to his senses and apologizing to Taya. He is questioned by the VA doctor whether he has nightmares about the things he did and saw in the war. Chris explains that he can't sleep because of all the folks he tried to help but couldn't. The doctor urges him to volunteer at the VA hospital to aid badly injured veterans. As a result, he often spends time with veterans, assisting them and listening to their tales. Chris looks to be recovering, as he starts to readjust to civilian life. He is an involved father who spends time with his kiddos and, as he did with his own father when he was young, takes his son out on his first hunting trip. Taya is happy now that her husband is more emotionally secure, and their relationship strengthens as a result. Chris takes Eddie Ray Ralph, a veteran he has been counseling for post-traumatic stress disorder, to the shooting range. Sad to say, after that day it was discovered that Chris had been murdered by Eddie.